Welcome to yet another edition of Grab a Coffee. My name is Kasiate, Simon Kasiate, long-time reporter, waiting to corporate communication, now simply grabbing a coffee with my partner in crime, who seems to be out of location. And for that matter, I choose to sit in his traditional corner in our studio.
Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you for keeping the corner safe.
And of course, this episode is proudly sponsored by MultiChoice and their Showmax episode Show Now, which you can get for 11,400 using your Momo, and you'll have access to all their entertainment, including the FIFA World Cup.
Or simply catching up with some Kampala cream, Showmax is where all your favorite entertainment is.
I don't know if I should tell people where I am. It might be very scary.
Well, I just noticed a few seconds ago you switched off your video. I could only see sound waves, and I don't know what that means. But yes, it's always important to share with us your location. We need to know that you are safe and not up to some mischief.
I'm not up to any mischief. I am in a beautiful country called Kazakhstan. Mm-hmm. It's the world's largest landlocked country.
Wow.
Yes, it's the world's largest landlocked country. And impressively, it shares a border with both China and Russia.
Right in the middle?
Yes, it's in the middle of its biggest borderline is with Russia, the other borderline is with China, and there's a very little part of it that touches the Caspian Sea, but there's also other stands, Tajmanic stands that are below it. So yes, it's a very interesting country and with a very interesting people.
Why do I get the sense that one of the two huge neighbors will one day want to take a bit of it?
Well, Kazakhstan traditionally has been under Russian rule from the early days. They were under Russian rule and Soviet rule. So they've had a history of being occupied by their bigger neighbors. But, well, we will see where the world goes from here.
Considering that we are East Africa's other largest landlocked country, maybe is rivaled by Sudan.
Yeah, we share so many things in common. We really share so many things in common with Kazakhstan. So that's one of them, that we are landlocked in that regard, that we share the fact that we don't have access to sea and we have to go through our neighbors to get anywhere if we want to. Like us, they are an oil and gas producing country. We are becoming an oil and gas producing country next year. Unfortunately, we are the third biggest economy in East African community. They are the biggest economy in the Central Asian region. So that's slightly different.
In the South.
Yes. Yes. But they had one leader from independence till recently. And that's something we also share in common, long leaderships.
Yeah, independence was which year? 1962 like us or 1986 like us again?
I will leave it to our viewers and listeners to Google, because they need to have a land of their own history.
Great. So now, talking about history of nations and leadership in our country, you know very well that we are right again in the silly season. And last week, we know that the campaigns kicked off in earnest. We saw presidential nominees getting onto the nomination log, and they hit the ground running. President Museveni, I'm sure by the time he left the country, had already made his way to his first rally, which was at the cradle of his revolution in Luwero. And then, covertly, Bobby Wine went to the east. I believe he still believes in the saying that goes, wise men come from the east. So for wisdom to start off his campaign, he started off in the east. And then we had other candidates like our comical friend Munyagwa starting off in the center of Kampala with his usual rhetoric. Now, right now, President Museveni is in the Lango sub-region, but we have also seen reports of the usual gymnastics where Bobby Wine's convoys still get, blocked and redirected by the police. But you may want to, from where you are, have you been, Raymond, able to see the form or the substance of our campaigns as they are taking shape? Let's start from the manifesto launch of President Museveni. What do you make in terms of what the manifesto launch looked like, from at least what we would get as ordinary citizens of the airwaves and all the publications? I must also say that I have a hard paper copy of the Protecting the Gains, and I have been looking through it using my traditional way of scavenging through information by licking my index finger and flipping the pages. But tell me, did you get a sense that the manifesto launch served you with enough snippets to have an appreciation of what could be in this voluminous book?
Well, Simon, first of all, for our listeners, I think we're going to have a series of podcasts where we break down these manifestos down to the detail. And maybe not to spill too much, we'll definitely have to speak about those manifestos in the company of the leaders that have fronted the manifestos. I've had a chance to look at both the National Unity Platform and the NRM manifestos. Both of them are impressive documents in terms of the way they set out, the aspirations they set out with. I was a little bit sad because none of them spoke about the limitations to achieving those aspirations. Everyone tended to promise very large things without speaking very honestly about how might they fiscally be able to fund some of these large aspirations.
For
I,
example, the
I
NRM, which is having its sixth manifesto and not speaking much to what bottlenecked the previous five manifestos from
Yeah,
actual.
and that's the thing. Like for the NRM, of course, they have to be a little bit more honest with their manifesto because the chances of them implementing the manifesto are higher because they're the incumbent party. Chances of implementing the manifesto are higher because they will get into government. The National Unity Platform doesn't have this shackle holding them down. They can aspire as widely as they can because they haven't had a chance at government. And if they got into government, then they would have to readjust their existing manifesto with existing public finance that they will find. You see, manifestos are really broad documents. They talk about what the party might want to do for people, but what's most important is what public finance architecture they find immediately they assume government. So we definitely have to say in April next year, how much money will be in the consolidated fund. If you want air ambulances, if you want railways, if you want mass transport systems, how much money is in the public infrastructure kitty might just determine whether you can or can't do those things. But in terms of being aspirational, I thought both manifestos were limiting in the nature of the aspirations. None of them spoke about how you transform the city center, which has 65% of the GDP in terms of transport, infrastructure, public housing. None of them spoke at length about linking us with our border neighbors, either through railways or through air transport. None of them spoke at length about the change in demography in the population that they are going to lead and how that might impact on their governance. So, again, hats off, the documents were really large. They were very impressive. They were very aspirational. But technically, if you approach them as a policy personnel, they have many areas of weaknesses, and there are many areas of questions which we will need to interact with the candidates to get the best out of it. But some of them were really what you'd call the soft touchable issues. For example, National Unity Platform spoke about human rights and justice. How they might be able to achieve that when they get into government is important. Would that entail a reform of the Uganda police force? How does the reform take? What kind of reform process would the police have to undertake? They've spoken about quick access to justice. How are they going to be able to do that? Are they going to increase the number of justices, or are they going to increase the number of judgments that judges roll out? Are we going to see them thinning the level of pensions that judges get? Because that's one of the limiting factors to getting more judges. They say they want to construct more court buildings. How might they be able to do that? In what areas will they be able to do that? So I found the document aspirational, but from a policy perspective, we need to speak more to the people that met them to try and understand whether they'll be able to achieve those aspirations.
Well, just to digress a little bit, Raymond, and you just talked about the police force and the kind of reforms that need to be in there provided by the different manifestos. We wake up to very sad news this morning with the passing of our mutual friend, Charles Kataratambi. I do not know whether you already picked that information. And we send out commiserations to his family. I think Charlie was one of those refined police officers that served diligently and had a good head screw to his shoulders. But away from
he also had an eagle team at police. He really was a forward-thinking police officer.
Earlier days, he also was, I think, heading the press desk, and I think that was my first interaction with him when our other mutual friend had trouble with the system. I remember when one of our friends did mention a few uncharitable things about President Museveni, and Charles personally tasked me to deliver Mwenda to him, which I did, and that led to weeks of incarceration, which I think he learned a few lessons. But Raymond, we've looked is, we've tried to touch a bit of the, form of the manifesto. Let's look at the substance of the manifesto, but let's look at the form of the campaign. President Museveni shows up in Luwero, and his campaign is, well, the usual grandfatherly kind of talk. And he goes to Luwero, the cradle of his revolution, at the tail end of the last term, where Luwero had shown him shege, if I may use our strict language, that the LC5 chairperson, that is current moment, is opposition. The area members of parliament, all of them almost without exception, are the opposition. Now, President Museveni shows up there, and let's not forget that in the last election, he, I think, traded Bobby Wine, if you look at the figures. If the figures are anything to go by. But this is the cradle of his revolution. So he goes back to Luwero, and he simply tells them, look, you guys have, for the longest time, regarded yourselves as orphans, and so you wanted to punish me and brought on all these leaders. But now I come back to you, and you still have problems. So what did the leaders that you elected that were outside NRM do to salvage the circumstances for which you felt disenfranchised by the NRM? He goes a step further to pick up one of the leaders that lost in the last election, that did not get the flag, and actually literally whisks her away and takes her for a meeting at State House, which we are told from reports that it was to, provide her a platform for a job and other perks. That kind of campaigning, and other reports we're beginning to see coming through from the NRM camp in different parts of the country where money is exchanging hands and all that. Does that form speak to an urban campaign of 2025?
And I think this is the difficulty, the power of incumbency in Uganda's presidential elections is just so large. In the last election, I think, no, not the last, the previous one before that, Amama Mbabazi actually went to the Supreme Court to challenge whether the president could dish out incentives on his campaign. Remember, the president had given out whores. And one of the contestants was, do those whores constitute bribery during campaigns? Can they be seen as such? And the court was sort of fizzly about it. So, one, I really, first of all, the entire idea that, you must vote a specific party for government services to reach you, that itself is a complex thing. It's a very, I don't know, in 2025, 2026, do you want to give services only to people who vote you?
The wording should be that you are elected by the majority, yes, but when you come into office, you serve all.
Exactly. But of course, there's a power that underpins this, that, people who will vote you, the large voting population, large voting blocks will have demands when you get into power. We've seen that in Kenya, for example, the mountain demanding that these are things that we agreed upon as the mountain before you got into the presidency, and we want them. I don't think that we've gotten to that level in Uganda, but again, it would be bastardizing our politics if we went down that route. Again, it would be very hard, to stretch yourself and aspire if you want to give out jobs at campaign rallies. It might also dampen the mood of your manifesto team, which has written a great manifesto, to see the way that you go about it. And also, it's really difficult because then the opposition has no response to that. Can Bobby Wine issue out jobs? Definitely not.
And then he give loans to associations of masters of ceremonies and panelists like yourself.
Yes. Can he do that? Maybe not. He signed a document, I remember, with the Teso community on the return of their cows. And the question is, how would you be able to achieve that in any case? So, yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult campaigning period if we go about campaigns this way. Simon, you're muted. I don't know why.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Absolutely. So rightly you say, the power of incumbency continues to have a huge effect in as far as being the wind beneath the wings of President Museveni's campaign. And let's flip the coin and look at NUP on the other end. Here is a presidential campaign that has kicked off in earnest, but coincidentally, first day of the campaign, that very afternoon, the list of ticket holders for the various constituency members of parliament comes out. And we now see a huge story boiling in from there, that those that were seen to be almost sure deal to get the party ticket haven't gotten it, and we are seeing many of them closing ranks and saying they are going at it as independents. They are joining other parties, including the most comical bit of it is, I think one candidate expected to get a Lubaga South or Lubaga North constituency ticket, who was already on the campaign trail with Bobby Wine with an ambulance that he had donated to the campaign trail, waking up the next day in the morning after the bad news and saying, well, I'm going back to the city and I go back with my ambulance. What does that say about the unity of the national e-unity platform as we stand now? At the critical
There will
juncture?
always be backbench revolt, and the NRM has faced its own backbench revolt. There are people who ran in the NRM primaries who say they are going to run independent. The National Platform now is also dealing with its own backbench revolt, where people who do not get the party card then try and run against the party in independent campaigns. Again, we spoke about this earlier, that, the nature of picking candidates that the National Platform had decided to go for was going to lead to this. The people are going to contest the outcome of the result. They were going to raise multiple red flags over the result. Many of them were going to just use this moment to campaign against the party itself. So they're in a difficult spot, but backbench revolts are just like that. When you have a backbench revolt, you have to pick on the whip and either offer incentive or whip people into line. So one of the ways to sort it is go to the ballot and defeat the person. The other way to sort it is to have a backroom deal in which, one of the candidates withdraws in favor of the other. We didn't speak about it, but the NRM, I think, has spent the last 3 weeks trying to do that, forcing people who wanted to run independent sort of drop out of the race and offer them incentives. So the National Platform would also have to do something like that. I don't know how many incentives they have to offer people like Medad.
The next question, how much of incentive power do they have, does Bobby Wine have, to ensure that all these warring actions can be brought around?
But it could also be the whipping power, which is we will go to your constituencies and campaign against you and defeat you in the constituency. And I mean, it's also a very high line to...
Not as big as the party, matter of fact.
Exactly. If Medad Segon or Joyce Bagala is defeated, that's the end of your political career. I don't see you recovering after that. So when you choose to go the independent line and go against the party, and if the party campaigns against you and beats you, then your political career is dead and buried in the sand. Yeah.
Well, let's look at away from politics, because away from other than politics, life still goes on in this part of the world.
Yes.
Now, and
Simon, we need to talk about this. On 8th of October, the Ugandan Constitution turns 30 years. That
absolutely,
it will be a very impressive moment for us to say, how far we've come. 30 years. Is it still a holding constitution? Do we need to change it? Do we need to find other things to do with ourselves?
You said do we need to change it? Raymond, I don't think the document promulgated on the 8th of October 30 years ago, if it met the current document now, they would certainly look like no way. I mean, it's easier to get my picture when I was on Teens Club with a box skirt, wearing an ear stud and shredded jeans, and make a comparison with me today, and you can tell it's the same boy, only grown older. But I think our constitution need to be getting Raymond's childhood picture and saying this is Simon when he was 50 years ago.
Yes, it will be an interesting moment to watch. I'm excited about 8th of October, mostly because of the conversation that will lead up to the 8th of October. The constitution is a political document, it's a social document, an economic document. So that's important to also look at what it will look like when it finally comes. Yeah.
Sometimes I incline more to form as opposed to substance. I was watching old videos from the Constituent Assembly, and I was more interested in looking at the caliber of members that were in that hall at what is today the Serena International Conference Center, and look at the caliber, the age, and the sturdiness of debate, and juxtaposing it with what we have in the August House. And boy, oh boy, how low we have sunk. But what's also very interesting is that those who have not died, we see them still in the troughs of politics, campaigning to get back into legislation. And yes, we must admit they were sterling performers in their heydays. They possibly still are now, only overpowered by numbers and the dropped quality of those that have come in. But what do you make in terms of the quality of the debate then that informed the current constitution as we have it? Are you confident that these guys were actually a good constituent assembly that put together a solid document?
You know, Simon, I don't share your nostalgia. I think, yes, granted, they were good legislators in the Constituent Assembly. They are really good legislators in our current assembly. The numbers are large. There are some bad apples, but there are very many really good legislators. I complain a lot, for example, with Abdul Katuntu, but I can't take away the fact that he's a very fine legislator, down to the numbers. The existing bench, the minister's bench, I complain about the Prime Minister, Robin Hanabanja, but you have a person like Chio Chwanuka, the Attorney General's office. You can't take away the fact that he's a very, very good person. You can't take away the fact that Norbert Mao, regardless of the political shape and size he comes in, that he's a very good debater in regards to that. We'd have a lot of contestations in terms of the kind of quality, but it's also that the parliament has expanded. There are a lot more members of parliament in there, but there are also very good legislators there. There's an MP from Bala, I forget his name. He's one of the brightest legislators on public finance. I've dealt with him at close range, so I know this. You have people like Semu Junganda. You can't take away the fact that they are one of the people that hold government to account perpetually, using budget documents, using numbers, using figures. You can't run away from that. So I would say, the bench is larger. The players are more now. The quality has gone down because of that, the numbers, but they're still really fine legislators we have. And I guess that we'll talk about in the future.
Let's look at some of the things that the Constitution guaranteed as we conclude this conversation. The Constitution, as it were, was a strong document as far as putting across a zero tolerance to corruption. It was a strong document in terms of guaranteeing basic human rights and freedoms. And today, you can't say that has been ameliorated as far as wiping out corruption, and neither can you say that the country is enjoying freedoms and rights as was enshrined in the Constitution and guaranteed by it. So what gives? Would one therefore be right to say that our Constitution is a great document, but the implementation of the same, or should we say the compliance to the same, is what remains wanting and what can be done? Because when we have our laws, but things happen.
Yeah, there's something that happened to the Constitution when term limits were removed, because the removal of term limits then affected civil and political rights in general. It created this loop-sided power structure in which the executive then got robust power over all the other elements of power, whether it was the judiciary or the legislature and parliament. So yes, the removal of term limits made the Constitution a much weaker document, and we must accept that. One of the core discussions to have is the discussion on civil and political rights. But two, degrading and inhuman treatment that mostly comes from state agencies. We need to have a conversation on how to reform state agencies so that they treat people humanely, whether those people agree or disagree with the status quo that exists. There's also a conversation to be had about economic rights and the distribution of economic rights fairly across the board. Some sections of Uganda have not benefited from this economy as other sections of Uganda have benefited. So there's a conversation to be had. But also, Simon, I hasten to say there is no perfect polity in the world. So because there's no perfect polity in the world, these are ongoing live discussions that we must have every day of our lives. So that's why I'm excited about 8th October. Let's have the robust conversations. Let's have a moment in which we discuss openly.
Talking about excitement towards the Independence Day and the Constitution 30th anniversary on 8th of October, I must tell you that on the running circuit, where I am an active member, Raymond, we have an independence run that's going to take us all the way from Kampala into Entebbe. Are you looking forward to that run, Raymond?
I am looking forward to that. I have registered. I have my bib. I land the night before, so I haven't done any training for my 21 kilometers.
There are no running.
Be there.
Or is the weather so bad and the streets so crowded that you can't run, Raymond?
No. I have a different schedule here, so I can't run. It's also just about to touch winter in Kazakhstan, so If you went out running, you'd be signing your own death wish.
Raymond, I know that time is of essence on your end, and so it is on our end. And
Yes.
I believe, unless you have anything to add, like what you are reading, what you are watching, I noticed that on your way out, you decided to queue up all these series that you had.
I'm reading.
So
I'm
you may
reading
not
two things. I
but
told you
what you're watching.
Jinping's the one. I couldn't carry it because of the weight, so I carried a much smaller book by a guy called Benjamin Labatut, When We Cease to Understand the World, which is a book really about why we may not perfectly understand many things in the world, or why our knowledge as human beings on the world is very limited. So I'm excited about that. What are you reading, Simon? We agreed you'd be reading this week.
I have a hard paperback copy of the NRM Manifesto and the FDC Manifesto, which I managed to access online, and I'm still reading them
Yes.
side by side and making my notes to
Yes.
inform.
But we also
absolutely-
must tell our listeners, so that they don't nail you to the cross, that whilst you're reading that manifesto, I was tasked with reading the Nook Manifesto, because we're going to interview these candidates at some point. So we need to get as much information as we have.
I am waiting with hands itching to land on Munyagwa's Manifesto and all these other people here as well get a feel of what, for
We have
example,
to. How good is your French, Simon?
well, I'm Paul. Je parle un peu français, mais I speak better French than Kiswahili. So I think I'm on the side of Munyagwa on that. Never mind that I'm always in Europe. Yes,
Thank you
Raymond.
so much. Please keep Kampala safe until I get back.
And please don't get yourself involved in any mischief, especially being in that you are in between China and Russia. That's not one place. I want to receive you in person at the airport, not in a body bag.
All right. No worries. Thank you
Our
so much.
listeners and viewers for Grab a Coffee, this is a wrap for this edition. But certainly, at every Friday we drop you an exclusive conversation on matters that really pertain to our well-being, to the governance of our country, and our general survival in this place we call the world. Have a good one. Till next time.